We are going to be discussing today PI number 9, observations by supervisor, and basically what needs to happen before the end of the next or before the start of the next reporting period. As you know, we will be running the PIs in October, so we will be measuring the observations until September 30th. Observations of home visits and assessments are part of the quality assurance plan indicated in the new BPS is GA2. It's GA3 in our policy manual right now, but you know that we're slowly updating those policies, and so it'll be indicated with a correct number eventually. CA is tasked with the, we need to monitor how observations are done, and that is to ensure model fidelity to the HFA model. And we've noticed in the last PI periods that a lot of programs are failing this PI. And it is one of the PIs where you as programs have a lot of control over. So we wanted to share this presentation to be able to explain, where you can find resources to do the observations, why observations are very important, and how you can use the MIS to make sure that observations are happening and that you've got all of the ducks on in a row. So in the Healthy Families New York website, where I put the link there, under the QA/TA and FAQ tabs, you have PKNY's forms to conduct those observations. And the guidelines of what is needed is, you need 4 observations by supervisor for the FSS. Those are performed quarterly. You need 2 observations of an assessment per year, and those are usually recommended to be done every 6 months. And then if you are a dual role, that is someone who is doing both assessments and home visits, you will be required to do to have 2 home visit observations and 1 assessment per year. So we at the center developed this report, the 12-2B report called Observations by Supervisor, to help you, monitor this. The MIS reports, as with many reports, uses default dates, and those dates go a year back. But we want to strongly recommend that when you are monitoring for the PIs, that you use the PI dates. So we run them, as I said, twice a year. For the October 2022 PI, you're going to run the report from October 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2022. And if you want to start looking at the April PIs and organizing your tasks for then, you will run the report from April 1st, 2022 to March 31st, 2023. This PowerPoint you can keep forever, and you just change the year forward as we go along and new cycles come up. Why do we recommend that you use these? Because if you run it for today, for example, the default dates will take you a year back. That means that you might have observations that happened in a time that won't be used for the PIs that are run from October 1st. You might have some, August and September observations that happened last year, and you say, oh, I'm doing good, but, not for the PI period.
Corinne, there's a question for you, actually.
Yes.
So Marisa from Broome asked, it's part-time staff still 2 observations per year?
Well, yes, we say that, the observations have to be done to make sure that you are, following guidelines. And even if it's a part-time job, if it's a part-time visitor, you still need to be observed to make sure that you're following the model. So the short answer is yes.
There's actually another question in the chat, but do you want to save all the questions for at the end? Or
Yeah, I
Okay.
thought I had said that, but maybe with all the fiasco that was my beginning
Oh, no,
of
no,
this
no,
presentation, I
sorry.
forgot to mention
Okay.
that, so I'm sorry about that.
No, no, no.
And
I saved
yes,
all
it would
the
be
questions.
better
Mhm.
because I can't see the chat
Gotcha,
very
gotcha.
easily right now, and so I see the numbers increasing, but I
Okay.
have it closed so that I can see stuff.
Okay, thank you.
So anyway, so we were saying, or I was saying, one important thing also that you have on that tab in the HFNY website is the QA calendar, which is that colorful chart that I've been showing for the past few years, where we recommend that you do take time, and observations are usually indicated to be done the first and the second month of the quarter to leave time, and the third month in the quarter to catch up if anything goes by. Because as you all know, home visits are canceled, and you might have had everything set up to do the observation, and then that visit gets canceled or that assessment gets canceled, and you don't want to leave it for the last month in the reporting period, because then you're scrambling all over to try and get those. So that is why we strongly recommend that you use the future dates so that you can plan with time and ahead. Okay, so now let's go to the report, and look at it. I asked you all to print out the report that goes for your program. So you might notice that the cohort indicates that it's going to list all staff, that is FRS, FSSs, supervisors, and program managers, anyone who is doing home visits or assessments during the report period, which is the year back. We have a program summary at the top, which will indicate those that are counted towards the PI. Because as you might know, we say that new staff or staff that haven't been in on their jobs for a year won't be counted, so they're going to be grayed out. Program managers and supervisors are not counted towards the PIs either, but everybody is listed on this report so that you can, for example, in the case of the new staff, you can still start organizing those observations. That new staff might need even more observations than just the 4 or the 2 that are requested. So you want to make sure that you have them listed there on the report. So in the summary, it will list, if you have someone who is exclusively an FRS who has not performed any home visits during the reporting period, they're going to show up as an FRS. Then you'll have the FSSs that you have, and those are and there you would have anyone who in the reporting period has done both assessments and home visits. And you get them listed, and you get the total score of what, how many are meeting the PI. Now, because we run it with future dates, it might be that you have, 1 out of 6, and you're saying like, what? Don't worry about that. That is because you're running with future dates. And so you have time to complete them. And that you see when you look at the detailed piece of the report, where it's going to list every single worker on your program, and it's going to list their name and the score. So it's going to indicate, for example, that they have 3 out of the 4 home visits. So then you would say, okay, I have 3. I just need 1 extra home visit observation from here, from today till the end of the reporting period, which is 9:30. That is why we wanted to conduct this webinar with time to give you enough time to conduct any missing observations before the end of September, and hopefully everybody will be meeting this PI when we run them in October. So in the detail piece or section of the report, you will also notice that you have some names that are grayed out. And that is to make it easier on you. You would have like any new staff are grayed out. As I said before, that doesn't mean that they don't need observations. They need them, but they're grayed out because they're not counted in the program summary or for the PI. And you also have any supervisor that might be performing home visits or assessments, or program managers that are doing so. As we mentioned, the best practice guidance is that everybody gets observed and everybody gets a chance of making sure that they're following, best practice. You also have an indication of, as I said, the first home visit that was performed and the last home visit in the reporting period. And this is, like sometimes we notice that there are people that say, oh, but so-and-so is no longer an FSS, like now they're doing, some other job within. If they've performed a home visit during the reporting period, they're going to show up as needing an observation. So if you are deciding to move staff from one role to another, make sure that you plan ahead and that you consider any, observations that they might need, so that you don't run into the problem of not having those observations. And again, making sure that those observations happen is sometimes a bit difficult to plan, but by planning ahead, you should be able to figure it out. It also lists every the PCID of the observation that was done, and when that home visit was done, and whether it meets or not the requirements. So you would have to see, okay, if it doesn't meet, if it says yes or no, you would very easily realize why. And that is because we have extra rules in this, and only one visit of the same type counts per month. So let's say that you run this report and you realize you have a home visitor who is, 2 out of 4, and we're in the middle of August. You would be okay if you do an observation in August and one in September. But if you leave it to September and you try doing 2 observations of the home visit in the month of September, only 1 will count towards the PI. So that is something to consider. If you have a dual role worker and they're doing two different types of one, a home visit or an assessment, those can happen in the same month because they are a different type of observation. You know, best practice says that you should not do them with, you know, the same family over and over again, but we consider the fact that maybe part-time workers don't have all those many families, or, you know, sometimes you need to observe that same family and that's the only observation, you know, so we counted towards meeting PI number 9. And so that will be indicated by the Y or the N on the meets requirements. So things to pay attention when you look at this report is that meets requirement, a column, also the score up on each or next to each person's name, which gives you and indicates to you how many out of the 4 or out of the 2 they have. How do you make sure that you're counting these, and how do we know that the MIS knows that these observations happen? The home visits, you go to the home visit log, and on the visit information tab, you have home visiting program supervisor. You click on that and you know, you have observation by supervisor. So if the supervisor participated in the visit, you would indicate there if the supervision happened. For the frog observation, you have question number 13 on the identifying info tab, where you need to click that box in order to get it counted towards the PI. So with that said, we're done. I've put here my email address, Young Uns, also Miley, although Miley is taking some leave, so she won't be around for some time. But reach out to me if you have additional questions. But now I'm going to stop sharing and hopefully go over the questions in the chat, because now I'll be able to see it. And again, I apologize for the start of this presentation. Hopefully it helped once I got going. So, Young-An, you were going to let me know where we start with the questions.
Yes, sure. So there were some conversations going on in the chat with Rain and Emily and Roxanne. So the questions were about the staff who have dual role and then have cross training and the timing of those observations.
Okay, so I think we have a lot of time. I scheduled this for an hour and a half, and I know that we're not going to take all that much time. So I think we have time to, if you unmute yourself and repeat the question to me, we can go over those. Ray, I see that you're talking, but I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I have a staff who was recently dual rolled. We're going everybody being dual rolled. And she had her first frog today, and I definitely was not able to observe. I had an interview and whatnot. So I'm just not sure how this will impact my next PIs for the next PI. Like right now, my everything looks good.
What happened when you run it with the dates that I gave you?
Everybody's meeting.
So then I think is this a new person that you're that you just
been
hired?
here a little bit over a year.
Oh, so she will appear in the
Yep, she's here and she got her observations for, home visits. I just have not had the opportunity to observe her in a frog.
Yes, well, she will appear as needing a frog observation if she's already done a frog, because basically that's how we count. So she will be showing. What I suggest is, you have a month and a half, hopefully, to make sure that the next assessment that she does get observed.
Okay.
And then I had similar concerns as Rayanne, and more like, I guess, just as discussion to kind of bring up in relation to whether it's something that might be addressed in policy as we're talking, like as we're developing new policy for QA, or if it's something that, like, when we run the PIs, is it something that we might request an exemption or exception for? But like staff that aren't, fully dual role in terms of what they do 100% of the time, but we had cross-trained somebody to cover assessments in a pinch. And if they kind of do one or two as a backup during, like, I know I have somebody that's, or FRS is going to be going on maternity leave at some point, so she's going to be doing it a little bit more often. But if we have a pinch and we need some assistance, we just do one or two here, we then are finding ourselves kind of scrambling to then get another assessment scheduled and observed. And I mean, in my experience also, like, if they're doing an assessment, once, I would kind of want to give them a chance to do it on their own rather than me just kind of going in and observing for that one assessment that they're doing after not having done it in a while. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to kind of bring that up as an issue. And I know Roxanne had mentioned that she was that she didn't meet for a similar kind of situation in the past, but is that something that, like, is talked about with central administration as far as like policy or how we take that into consideration?
Unfortunately, it is kind of like if you do it, you need an observation pretty much. And so we've had this in the past where people haven't met because of, and it is unfortunate, but then on the other hand, you need, the other side of it is you don't want assessments or home visits done by people who do it every now and then and they don't have the skills, and you might be, missing out on that happening. So that's why the importance of the observation. So it is a tricky place to be. That's why we, I know that this has happened where exceptions have not been granted in that case. So I'm saying, like, prepare for, take my advice, and if you have people that are doing home visits or assessments, make sure it might not be the first one, but the second time that they go, that you do get that observation in.
Roxanne, did you want to add more to this conversation?
Oh, Roxanne and I have discussed this many times.
But I have a question though.
Okay.
So let's say both roles don't start at the same time. So the second role is not consistent with the hire date. Can that be a consideration in the report?
Yeah, to be honest, I'll take it back to CA and see what they think, or the policy. And I'm sorry. Oh, Andrea, can you mute? Oh, there. I'll take it back and see what how we could consider that, but I see your point, but the important thing that I wanted to put across is that we are not considering hire date or training date of the FSS or the FRS. We consider for this report having done a home visit or an observation, a home visit or an assessment. That is what triggers the report to go and look for the observation. It's not how, the role, it is having done that. And then it would look to see whether that person is a new hire, and it would, kick them out. But if they're not a new hire, most likely it would, and Jay, you can help me there, it would probably
Yeah.
count them in.
Yeah, they have to have been in the role for a year, so that's going to eliminate workers that started, a month before we start measuring the PI.
Okay, that's good then.
Yeah, so yeah, so that's what I was saying. So let's say the person has been in FSS for, 2 years, but in the last month, they've been cross-trained to also conduct assessments and started a month ago. So would that assessment now be counted as an observation? And would there be an expectation for them to have been observed twice, even though they've only been doing that specific role for a month or two?
Well, in that case, if their FRS start date was 2 years ago, then it shouldn't have been 2 years ago. It should have been a month ago when they first were trained for the dual role. And therefore they will not have been in the role for a year. But if the FRS start date was 2 years ago and they didn't have the training until a month ago, that's a whole different problem. Does that make sense, Roxanne?
Yeah, that's the dilemma is, with the dual role, they don't necessarily, it's not like upon hire, the person becomes, starts with a dual role. Sometimes you start the dual role later on. So I was just wondering how would that would be measured?
Well,
So on the heels of that, does the report look at like if there is somebody that's dual role that's checked off the FSS and FRS, does it take into account the start date of the FSS role versus the start date of the FRS role? Because that's what would kind of distinguish somebody that hasn't been in that particular role for a whole year.
Yes, and to be honest, we would have to look at that because I believe that we're not taking into consideration, we're taking hire date, right? We're not taking role date.
no, it's roll date.
It's role date. Okay,
It
so
is
then
roll
you
date.
should be good.
Yeah, and it looks at them separately. So that kind of addresses Olivia's question as well.
Yeah.
It's not just that it's different than the FSS role start date, but that it's independent. It's independent and the start date really should not be set until that person is actually in the role and they're ready to start their training and doing an assessment after coming out of the training.
So then they would complete an assessment and they would show on the report, but not towards the PIs because they wouldn't have had a year on that role.
Correct.
Good.
Perfect.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. And
That
Tarina,
is awesome news.
and Tarina also had a question. So how long can someone go without completing an assessment to continue to be able to do so and then do one? So Tarina, do you want to add more? And my apologies if I'm not saying your name right.
No, that's fine. Yes, I just wanted to know if it's been over a year. So I'm pretty much avoiding having someone just help out with frogs because the only way it would be helpful is if they were to do one when I'm doing another one or have something going on while I have a vacancy in the FRS role.
The answer to
So
sorry.
I've been in avoiding that, but now it's been over a year since the only other person on the team has done any parent surveys.
Well, the good thing is that the frog training was rather recent. So it's not like the skills are from way back because everybody got trained pretty recently. So, but having said that, I think that it's such a fine line to know, okay, we have this person to fill in case that we need to, but then that person, their skills become rusty because they don't do that very often. And so that is what they're trying to avoid. And that is the whole point of, putting it in between in the quality assurance. You want to assure that the quality is there.
So probably should keep that person
You
fresh.
should keep that person, make sure they received the training recently, make sure that you do observe and provide support. And for that is what I'm saying, make sure that you're using those forms that Bikini created. And for this, you could also reach out to your QA specialist at Bikini to find out, so can we still consider somebody having the skills if they received the training a year ago, and it might depend on the person. So it's not something that the MIS will indicate to, but it's somebody, maybe on the QA specialist team that could help you out.
And the key thing, Trina, is that each PI period, you start with a clean slate. So we don't really look to see, well, this person was trained 5 years ago and hasn't done a frog ever. We don't really look at that. We once they've done one, then we include them. But the skills becoming rusty, that's a whole different issue. That has
Right.
nothing to do with this report.
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
I just
I
wanted
think
to,
if they have a refresher, or if you make the decision since they had the training multiple years ago, then you just might want to send them to another training.
And on top of that, you
Okay.
are the best, you are the ones that be able to gauge this. It's nothing, we can't do anything about that. on
I
our
think
end.
the other thing with the frog too is we have
Yep.
access to those trainings that we attended through Healthy Families America. So those are really good resources, Trina, for people who haven't really done any yet, or it's been an extended period of time. So that's the other great thing, is we do have access to that training material. And also to offer, one thing that I done was to offer to do a mock frog, just to kind of keep those skills honed a little bit. She can either do it they can do it with a family member or with myself or another coworker.
That's a
So
good
those
idea.
are just some things that we've done to kind of keep people in the groove of the FRS.
That's a great idea with the mock frog. Yeah, thanks.
I'm loving the conversations here. Emily had a different question. So if we as a system are having trouble consistently meeting this PI, she's wondering how often it's due to situations where we have staff dual role or cross-trained filling in.
We haven't specifically looked at that, Emily, but I think when the committee talks about this, we will discuss that as well. And we'll look at the numbers and see how large a problem it is.
I think that mostly because I've been doing TA with those that do not meet usually, and PI9 is one that doesn't, that appears quite often, but because all the rest of the PIs have been met, or you're up in the 10 or the 11 out of 15, we don't get to talk because I usually contact people that, do not meet a lot more of them. So, but basically what I see is not understanding the report. And that's why I wanted to share how the report works. And also many times is like people do not send an exemption request. Like, for example, if you have someone on leave and, you know, they've been on leave for 2 months and a half out of the 3 month of, you know, there is in a quarter, there's very little opportunity for you to have done that observation. And yet people sometimes do not send an exemption request for that. So my take is make sure that you read the explanations on the schedule, take that exemption period seriously and look into this. But I think that when people start running the report with the future dates regularly and know what's coming down the pike and what they need, they're going to find it easier to make sure that they have those observations in by the end of each quarter and or each period. That is why, you know, like this is one of those PIs that you have a lot of control over. And that is why we wanted to make sure that you are aware of all the control that you have and all the planning that can go in and how the report can help you with that planning.
I don't see any other chat so far or question in the chat, but if anyone else has a question, please type them up here.
Or just start talking.
That's a good one too.
Well, if you don't have, or if you think of any other thing that you say, oh, I should have asked, you want to reach out to us, and you can do that by emailing us. I hope this was useful, and we talk soon. So you have a few more minutes to go to noon, and we finished earlier than what we expected. That's great. Thank you all.